Predator Ooze, Brew that he was trying with Tragic Slip and some of the other cards in there. Never really worked out as well as he wanted it to. He did lose playing for top 8 in one of the opens. You're going to see him start with an Overgrown Tomb and an Elvish Mystic. Classic start for Kibler here.
Yep.
With a Mana Accelerant. But we'll see if this Golgari deck actually treats him a little bit better. We're going to see Santana start off with a Red-White Temple, going to scry. And one of the things that Brad did write about in his article this week is that the mana and the way that you play your lands with the Naya deck is very, very important because it seems obvious to start with the Temple, but that's not always the case. You see Dread Mangler coming across for 3.
Yeah, no, between having a lot of lands that come into play tapped and the sensitivity of having your colors in the right order, there's a lot of pressure on you ordering your lands the right way. You see Jose respond to the Dread Mangler with a Mizium Mortars.
So it's time to get that thing out of here. Kibler going to have to see exactly what his fob's going to be. Again, you see Santana's hand. He does have a Xenagos hiding out over there. He's got a Reaper of the Wild. So here's the 4/5. And this is the card. As you see Santana's going to take a look at it, we're going to bring it up on the screen for you guys as well because this is the interesting card from the Golgari deck that, it was kind of, it's this card that got it feels like it got thrown into Theros. It's just like, oh, what's this thing doing here? You got this 4/5 that dodges Mizium Mortars, can't be Selesnya Charmed, has a lot of relevant text on it. How good is this card? It seems like very is the answer.
Well, it's certainly well positioned right now. It's 5 toughness, so it's out of Mortars range. It's black, so it can't be Doombladed. And there's a lot of utility in that text box as well. Yeah. So this is sort of the right threat for the moment, in Brian's opinion.
Brian going to come across for 4 here. He's going to put a Boon Satyr on that thing, so a little bestow action. So another thing is absolutely gigantic. And it can be Selesnya Charmed right now, but Santana did not play that Temple Garden untapped, so he's going to have to take 8 on the chin, push his life total down to 9.
And if Jose wants to Selesnya Charm it, he has to do it right now, so Brian can't protect it with Hexproof.
Yep.
And then, he has his Boon Satyr still up and attacking. A lot of the philosophy behind Brian's deck here is he's disruptive and has things to sink his mana into later in the game. Boon Satyr is both efficient as a turn 2 play off of a Mana Accelerant and as a way to augment creatures later in the game. Barrels is in the deck for the similar reason.
So we're going to take a look here as a Thoughtseize. We're going to see there is Selesnya Charm.
Assume we are making a Knight in response.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be a Knight in response, and there is a 2/2. So we'll get the appropriate token out there. Thoughtseize is going to reveal Assemble the Legion, a Xenagos, and Double Mountain in the grip. Thoughtseize is obviously a great way to start the turn, so Brian knows exactly what he can do, how he can attack, how he wants to set up his turn as Reed Duke has joined the battlefield. I think Reed might die soon.
Oh, I think we're going to be on Chump Block Detail soon enough. And Assemble the Legion, one of the huge incentives to build the deck this way. We've seen Shaheen Sarani also advocate blue-white-red control. Assemble the Legion, an absolute haymaker against mono-black devotion.
Yeah.
It's been under the radar a little while. We've seen it as a singleton in some sideboards here and there, primarily for control matchups. But the metagame is in a place right now where it's a legitimate Game 1 card.
So Brian's going to take Xenagos, feeling that Assemble the Legion is going to take much too long to get online. So Thoughtseize is going to resolve, again leaving Santana with Assemble Legion and 2 lands. So now Kibler wants to figure out how exactly I'm going to go about attacking. It looks like we're going to go both sideways. Reed Duke going to get in front of the Reaper, going to get in for 1 with the Elvish Mystic, and just happily pass the turn back with mana available to give his Reaper hexproof if he needs to.
Yep.
Now the question, I don't know if you caught it, did Brian scry when that creature died?
I believe he missed a scry trigger.
Okay. As there is a Loxodon Smiter. Looks like that's probably going to be on chump blocking duty as well, as that Reaper is representing lethal damage. Kibler going to draw a card. I think he realizes that he may have just missed the scry. So he's going to move his mana to the back row. It is a Dread Mangler. In we go.
And this Reaper is lethal right now, so...
Yep. So he has to keep blocking it. Smiter's going to get in front. 3 damage from the Dread Mangler coming across. Put Santana down to 5. And Santana's kind of, and Kibler does remember to scry that time. Feels like Santana is basically in the hard lock here where he can't play Assemble Legion because it's going to be too slow to get online. He draws a Selesnya Guildgate, and he is going to pack it in. So Brian Kibler with his Golgari deck, which we do know he loves a green card or 20. He is up a game right now. And we're going to take a look at the sideboards. We're going to bring it back to the booth here for you guys, too, as we do take a look at these sideboards here. Patrick, I'm going to let you start over there with a sideboard that's probably going to be very reminiscent to Brad Nelson's.
Yeah, we have a Pythia Needle, 2 copies of Wear Tear, 2 copies of Last Breath, 2 copies of Sunhole Gilmage, 4 Mistcutter Hydras, 2 Assemble the Legion, and 2 Rurk Thars.
Okay. Anything in particular we like in this matchup?
I don't think I like any of these cards.
Oh, boy. That's not a good thing to say.
Yeah, I mean... Last Breath has some utility against Brian because of barrels. I'm not sure if Jose is necessarily going to put him on that card because he didn't see it game 1.
Sure.
Otherwise, we're just talking about Elvish Mystic and possibly, but probably not, Lawless Troll.
Sure.
The rest of the sideboard seems quite poor. I actually don't think he has anything to really bring in here.
Now, Summon Legion's kind of like an interesting card in this matchup because I think if you can get it online, it's actually going to be quite powerful, but we're looking at a deck that doesn't really have acceleration except for the Selesnya Key Runes to be able to actually get a Summon Legion out ahead of schedule. So we saw that last game where if the Summon Legion actually would have been able to get online, I think it may have actually just won the night play of the game. But as a result, it doesn't get online fast enough, and then he ends up losing the game after just being overrun by Reaper with a Boon Satyr on it.
The biggest concern I would have is just the combination of Thoughtseize and most likely Golgari Charm makes it kind of an uphill battle to try to get that thing into play.
Sure.
And as you saw in that game, there's going to be spots where it's just naturally too slow.
Sure.
So I think leaving the 2 that are in the deck is totally fine, but I would be hesitant to bring in any more copies than that.
Okay, you do mention Golgari Charm. Brian does have 2 of those. He also has a couple copies of Duress hanging out here, a few Doom Blades and Ultimate Price. You'll see a couple other cards here. He's got Mistcutter Hydras in his sideboard. Nothing terribly relevant here. I think the cards that are interesting, because this is a very spell-heavy deck, the Naya Control deck, how many discard spells do you want to have? He's got Thoughtseize. He has the ability to bring in Duress as well, but of course, with discard spells, as powerful as they can be in the early turns of the game, they're bad top decks. So how many discard spells, because he does have 2 Duresses here to go along with 4 Thoughtseize in his main deck, how many would you actually want after sideboard?
Well, I think the additional 2 Duresses sound fine. I wouldn't want to really overload it beyond that, but I can get behind 2 Duresses. If the Naya Control deck's bringing in anything, it's almost certainly more spot removal spells or more Planeswalkers or something to give it a more powerful later game. So I think it's unlikely that those discard spells are going to be dead draws.
And then taking another look here, he does have 3 copies of Gift of Orzhova, which I don't think are particular for this matchup, probably just for any more aggressive decks. Flying in this matchup is actually probably pretty good. Yep. But I'm not sure if this is exactly where you want to go. Of course, Golgari Charm is, I think it's, if Brian's familiar with this Naya Control deck, which he likely is, paying attention to everything as he always does. He knows that there's a Summon Legion from that Thoughtseize. He also knows that there are copies of Chain to the Rocks as well here. So I think Golgari Charm, a card that's fantastically positioned right now in the metagame anyway, is certainly going to come in.
Yeah, regeneration against Mizium Mortars, and there's a lot of utility in that card.
One thing that's kind of noticeable right now too is that the charms are really starting to see some more play right now. Of course, Azorius Charm being the best of the bunch. It's kind of funny because Azorius Charm, the camps are kind of split on how many of these cards should actually be in the Esper Control decks. You normally used to see 4 as an auto include. People are moving away from them. Christian Calcano thinks that people shouldn't be playing any of them.
Well, that's just. I'm sorry, Christian. That's just wrong.
Yeah, that doesn't feel right to me. There's too much utility in that card not to play any of them. But now you're starting to see Selesnya Charm starting to pick up a little bit. You're seeing Golgari Charm, people realizing how good that card is. In response to cards like Chain of the Rocks, Detention, Sphere, Underworld Connections, that card's starting to see a lot of play. So we all knew the charms were going to be good, and they're all going to find a home eventually. But it seems like Golgari Charm seems to be arguably the most well-positioned one right now.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of utility in all those modes. There's some of them, like you said, that have been played because of just overall total power level. I think Azorius and Boros Charm are the biggest ones there. And then we've seen some charms like Selesnya and Golgari because the total combination of utility is enough to make them flexible enough and versatile enough to show up. And so we've kind of seen both camps.
You see Santana's going to take a mulligan down to at least 6 cards here. Kibler's hand does have a Duress hiding out there, so we had a feeling that he would bring in more discard. He's brought in at least one of his Duresses in the sideboard. He also has the Thoughts he's hanging out too, so a lot of hand disruption as he does shuffle those cards far too quickly for us to be able to keep up with them to get a good look at what's in his hand, but it feels like he's keeping.
Yeah, and one of those Thoughtseizes in that deck is mine, so watching him shuffle like this is just killing me.
He can just keep it.
But I knew that was the cost going in. I loaned him an Underground Sea for Grand Prix Denver once, and he made day 2, and I got it back, and it just looked like it went through basically a paper shredder.
Yeah.
This is just some of the costs of friendship, you know?
It's the biggest mistake you can make, I think. This might be the worst person to lend cards to.
Oh, it's rough, but how am I going to say no? He's so charming.
Yeah, you make a very, very good point. That winning smile.
But I really like Duresses a lot in the sideboard in decks like this. Even if you aren't specifically targeting a deck with those Duresses, because almost every post-board matchup when decks are creatures and spells involves bringing in more spells rather. So Duress almost always goes up in value in post-board games.
Sure. And again, this is a super spell-heavy deck. The deck has 7 creatures, and part of Nelson's sideboard plan at some point was just to board creatures out. in specific matchups. So we'll see I mean, and one of his creatures he does have in his hand, Santana, is actually a spelled Advent of the Worm. So, there are a lot of things to take with duress in this matchup. Doesn't surprise me at all to see Kibler bring them in as we are underway in Game 2. Temple Garden to start here. We're going to see the hand with the duress of Chain to the Rocks, Advent of the Worm, Temple Garden, Locks on Smiter, and Storm Breath Dagron.
That is a rough hand for Santana. He's both missing a mountain for his Chain of the Rock. He's missing land drops. He has a double red spell in his hand. He's going to have to draw very well in these next couple of turns to have something, resembling a functional draw. Although it appears Brian's hand is very discard heavy, so it's possible if he draws a land, then that Smiter could actually be pretty productive here.
Yeah. Well, Temple Garden we knew about, but Mountain off the top. Here's a second duress there from Kibler, so he'll see that Santana did draw a Mountain. Chain of the Rocks, Thoughtseize, get your Dragon out of here. It's going to leave Santana with a Mountain and a Loxodon Smiter and a Mystery draw step coming. So Kibler has destroyed Santana's hand. Now he needs to get his offense online.
Yeah, now we're going to basically check to see if Brian can stop the Smiter. If he can, his odds of winning this game are very high, but again, I don't know if I saw a removal spell. He hasn't shown green mana yet, so it's possible his draw is also missing certain elements.
Big dumb element in the house here for Santana. Kibler with a force and just passing the turn back. So again, we'll see if he does have a removal spell. Santana drawing lands, which isn't the worst thing in the world, because that means if he does draw spells, he'll be able to cast them.
Yep.
In for 4 means no removal spell yet from Brian. Santana going to play a Mountain and just pass that turn back. So, for a mulligan of 6 and getting your hand shredded by discard, he's actually doing okay. Now here's a Reaper to actually just brickwall that Smiter.
Yeah, this is a big test for Jose this turn. One of his powerful 5-drops, either Assemble the Legion or Stormbreath Dragon, very powerful here, but otherwise this Reaper is going to start locking up the ground and giving Brian some time to find additional threats to start to go on the offensive.
Smiter is the play. Santana going to hold the land in case Kibler does draw another discard spell, a play that I do like quite a bit here. But as you see, this is, again, the power of Reaper. It having 5 toughness means that it's just going to win the battle. There is the Thoughtseize, shows a forest, so good play there from Santana holding that land.
We'll see if Brian has any sort of follow-up here.
See, he's got a Boon Satyr hanging out there. He does play a Swamp and just going to pass the turn back.
And there's Stormbreath Dragon, the draw. Excellent draw for Santana.
Play that, and I didn't have this when you Thoughtseize me, but I do have it now, so we're going to get into the red zone for Santana. And I think you just come across in the air. I don't think there's any reason. The Smiter attack is kind of interesting here, because if you attack with both Smiters, you trade a Smiter for a Reaper, but you get an 8 points of damage, which would put Kibler down to 4. Golgari Charm's actually going to take care of that. Going to pass the turn back. It's an Abrupt Decay. I was trying to figure out, okay, so it's an Abrupt Decay so that Kibler can scry, because he's looking for an answer to that dragon.
Yep.
Which means that obviously he does have a Golgari Charm in his hand. Santana going to untap. He's drawn his card already. And for 4 more. Do you have an answer yet? I know you have a Golgari Charm. There's a Temple, scry. See Santana, is he happy with what he sees? This is worth consideration here. Could be a bluff.
It's worth taking your time here. I can't imagine him keeping anything that's a ground-based threat here or a land.
Yeah.
So it's...
Yeah, bottoms up, he decides. Kibler going to draw a card here, and he's going to draw his deck and everything else and say, I can't beat your dragon. So after shredding his hand with discard in the early turns of the game, Jose Santana able to draw out of it. As I mentioned, drawing lands in that middle stage of the game, very big deal, so that if he does draw any spells, he can get the job done. Storm Breath off the top, and that's good enough to do it. Kind of like Thunderball was good enough to do it in our previous standard format.
Well, I don't think that you can beat the Naya control deck just with discard. There's some decks like Esper where that's a really good game plan, but the Naya control deck has so many big draws once it starts hitting 5 and 6 mana that there's a lot of pressure on you to disrupt them and then close out the game pretty quickly.
Yep.
You can't be sitting on your hands the whole game. It took Brian way too long to get on the board that game, and Jose had to get a little bit lucky to draw the Dragon or Assemble the Legion in that time frame, but Brian didn't really pressure him enough to. He gave Jose a lot of time to find those draws.
One thing that's kind of interesting too, that Thoughtseize where Jose held his land, it actually knocked Brian. It actually took a full turn off of his clock because it knocked Brian down an increment of damage, and then the dragon hits were able to actually sync up correctly, so that if Brian does get an extra turn, maybe he draws a removal spell and able to come back in that game.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, he played 2 Thoughtseizes that turn and got hit by a dragon 4 times.
Yep.
That's 20 damage. So
that's all it takes. So we are going to move on to game number 3 here between Jose Santana and Brian Kibler. Again, if you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan. Star City Games Open Series has made its way to beautiful Los Angeles, California, home of your favorite team,
the Los Angeles,
the Lakers. The Lakers, your favorite, the soul-sucking Lakers,
Yep.
as you call them. Also, the Los Angeles Clippers happen to reside here as well. We are right next door to the Staples Center, where both of those teams do play, and so we are going to enjoy the Los Angeles ambiance while we are here.
Yeah, my home away from home.
Yes.
It's right next door. Yeah.
A quick, what is it? A quick 45-minute drive for you up?
About an hour and 15 with no traffic.
Okay.
So 2.5 hours on the average we take.
Beautiful. that's just absolutely fantastic. Of course, if you guys do want to join in with us on Twitter, wondering about Brian's deck, or any other questions or comments you guys may have, at SCG Live, hashtag SCGLA. We'll be here for 10 rounds of Standard. Who knows how many rounds of Legacy tomorrow. But it's going to be a fun weekend all weekend long. Again, a lot of big names in attendance here. A lot of people, after speaking with them, Josh Hutter-Layton, Eric Froelich, a lot of guys saying, hey, I want to play in the Invitational in Vegas in December.
That's
what I want to do.
And furthermore, Los Angeles has a really robust and active Legacy scene.
Yeah.
So we're going to see a lot of locals who, if you pay attention to our West Coast coverage, maybe the occasional Grand Prix here and there, you're going to recognize some of these names. They're not Brian Kibler or Eric Froelich, but they are Legacy grinders who have a pretty wide depth of card availability and knowledge of the format. So Legacy in Los Angeles is, in my opinion, the most fun Legacy Opens to cover. Yeah,
I definitely agree with you. There's a lot of people, as you mentioned, a really, really nice scene here. You know, just one player off the top of my head, I think the man who brought us cupcakes this morning, Jacob Corey.
Yep.
Just one of the many Legacy players here. Jacob, thank you for the cupcakes. The vanilla cupcake, very good.
Yeah, a lot of beta duels will be on camera relative to your average Open tomorrow.
Yeah, normally we only see Chris Pakula with the gorgeous duels.
Yeah.
But now we're in Los Angeles, buddy. You're not special out here, Chris.
Right. Yeah.
So we'll see who's gonna, get their tournament off with a win. As Brian all smiles here with his Golgari deck, he will be starting game number 3 against Jose Santana and the Naya Control deck popularized by Brad Nelson. Again, this is a deck that I'm going to be watching a lot of over the course of the weekend. I want to see how many of these decks are in our top 8, top 16, top 32. The Naya Control deck. Again, it's very rare for you to see a player basically say, "Hey, I know that I 8-0'd Standard with this deck at a large tournament and then ended up winning the tournament, but don't play it because it's not good after this week."
Yep.
It's very rare for that to actually be the case, and that's exactly what Brad Nelson was saying about his Naya Control deck that he smashed the Invitational with last weekend. Now, as you mentioned, we felt that people were still going to play this deck, and you see Jose Santana doing that, and he's evened it up right now against Kibler. But I really want to see how this deck performs. If Brad was right about this deck being just a flash in the pan 1 week thing, or if it's better than he actually if it's better than he gives it credit for.
Yeah, I'm really impressed and interested by the sort of dispassionate analysis of it too.
Yeah.
Most people are very strong advocates. See Brian take a mulligan here. Most people are really passionate advocates for the decks that they build, particularly ones where they have tournament success. And to see someone offer up that sort of analysis after the fact, after winning the Invitational, is something you don't see very often. Most people would very loudly advocate for that deck once they've had that level of success with it.
Yeah, so it's a rare thing to see, and that's one. Again, there's a lot of storylines for this tournament. Is Esper the best deck? Are people going to play mono red? Is Kibler just playing green cards for funsies?
Yeah.
How good is Naya Control? That sort of thing. There's a lot of things to talk about over the course of this week, and a lot of results that we're going to be kind of keeping track of here. I know, taking a look at Brian's deck list right now, a lot of people have been wondering how many outs did he have to that Stormbreath Dragon off the top. You take a look at Kibler's deck list. He's got 2 copies of Hero's Downfall in his main. He has 2 copies of Doomblade in his sideboard to go along with an Ultimate Price. He also has a Vraska the Unseen, which you have to believe that he did bring in because it destroys a permanent. So there's a lot of targets for that. Then he has 3 copies of Gift of Orzhova, which is interesting because you could suit up a Reaper and then tussle with the Dragon, but I don't know if I really consider that now.
No, I don't think Gift of Orzhova is coming in against the removal Chain to the Rock deck. I think that's basically for mono red matchups.
All right. Kibler on his mulligan is 6. Is he happy? I know he's got a land hiding out over there. He is happy enough, and looks like we're going to see Elvish Mystic, a classic Brian Kibler start, a start that got him the Game 1 victory. Temple of Triumph here.
And Brian's deck has so much proactive stuff going on at 3 mana that the turn 1 mana accelerant leads to a lot of very powerful draws.
Yeah, it really, really does. We'll see if he has something great to come out of the chute with here. It is going to be a Lotless Troll. He's got another Elvish Mystic, so he's going to fire that off. He's going to pass the turn back to Santana. Santana draws an Elspeth, something that's going to be very scary down the line, but not right now.
And I believe that Brian has the one Vraska in his hand right now, so we might see turn 3 Vraska.
All right.
Be a pretty fun way to start the day off.
We've got an untapped Stomping Ground here. Santana going to go down. He's going to play a Chain to the Rocks. What's he going to do? That's interesting that he plays that untapped. Is there a reason to?
See what if Brian can generate the mana this turn for his Vraska. It also appears that he has another Troll in his hand.
Yeah, see Kibler shuffling very slowly here. deciding what to do for the turn.
I really hope my Thoughtseize isn't into that hand.
Yeah, I really do too, actually. I've never seen a card lose so much value so quickly, just going through the hands of one person.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume that your Thoughtseize is an older Thoughtseize from Lorwyn too, isn't it?
Oh, he specifically requested that to match the art, to match the art of the other ones that he had.
So as Kibler shuffles away, he's got some decisions to make. The Hall of Famer reaching. He's going to come across for 2. Looks like we're probably just going to see a lot with Troll. Yep, so he's going to play that, and he's going to be able to regenerate. So he chose not to play Vraska, something he could do this turn.
Said lands his Troll, has regeneration mana up.
So Santana, the interesting thing here is that it might go kind of unnoticed that Santana played his Stomping Ground untapped last turn.
Yes.
And then played Chain to the Rocks, which is something you don't need to do with Chain to the Rocks. So that was a bit of a misstep because it just says enchant a mountain. I don't believe it says enchant an untapped mountain. And now this could get ugly here. Because there's another Chain to the Rocks, takes another Lotleth Troll. And you see, after he played the Temple of Abandoned Scribes first, then plays Chain to the Rocks, passes the turn back. So if Santana doesn't play a Stomping Ground untapped, he should be, in theory, at 18. We're going to see if this comes back to bite him a little bit here.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if that contorted Brian's play at all last turn, where he was wondering what trick Jose could have available.
Yeah, there aren't a ton of them for a single red. I mean, there's a card like Shock, which isn't a card that's standard in this deck list. And again, if you're Kibler, you have to assume that he's just playing Nelson's deck card for card, or something very, very similar to it. And that's a card that's not hiding out in Brad's deck list.
Yeah. And also, he would have likely just shocked your Elvish Mystic on his own turn.
Yeah.
That was the thing that was going on, you know?
So again, Kibler shuffling through his hand. We know he has a Vraska in there. We're not sure about the other contents of those, as Chain of the Rocks is taking down both of those Lotleth Trolls. But it feels like now is about as good a time as ever to cast a Vraska.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
This feels like a good spot.
Now, don't forget, it does say destroy target non-land permanent.
Right.
So there's not the potential for a gigantic blowout here, just kind of a minor blowout. And it does start with 5, so he might tick it down, or does he want to tick it up? He's going to tick it up so he can go destroy permanent, destroy permanent.
Yeah, I think the what he was maybe contemplating there is if he ticks down, then Xenagos can just kill it if Jose has a 4th land and can make a haste token.
Sure.
So it's a little bit safer for him to lead off this way. It also just puts contorts Jose's play quite a bit here as well. You're looking at on-board kill, destroy target permanent. It really messes up the way, obviously, that he can develop his own board.
Yeah, I mean, this is where things get interesting, right? Because, I think a lot of people have a lot of experience playing against certain planeswalkers, Domri, for example, maybe Xenagos a little more often, Elspeth, that sort of thing. I'm not sure exactly how many people have the experience of playing against Vraskas when it's sitting there at 6 and looming to just go kill a permanent. There's a kind of a learning curve.
Yes.
Associated with playing against planeswalkers, and how much attention am I actually supposed to pay to this card? And right now, I think the answer is probably a lot.
Oh yeah, no, this is a really rough spot for Jose. The non-control deck is built so much around 4 and 5 and 6 mana permanents. It's really hard for it to play multiple spells in a single turn, and it plays permanents to the board for the most part. It's very challenging to get out of this spot. Vraska is a big pain.
So with Vraska looming, you see Santana can just cast Anger of the Gods to clear up those 2 elves, which I think is a solid play. It's going to slow down Brian's mana development a little bit. You're not sure how many lands Brian does have in his hand, but now with Anger of the Gods taking care of those things, now it's just time to worry about that Vraska. Vraska going to go up to 7. And Kibler just going to pass the turn back. So maybe Kibler's threatening the ultimate?
Well,
I don't know if we have any assassin tokens with us.
I think he's just happy to play draw go with Jose for a little while here, since it's very hard for Jose to develop his board in the face of the Vraska that's online.
Sure.
Just, Kibler mulligan, there's some, advantage to just getting some draw steps to allow you to develop your board, especially when Jose is pinned like in the way that he is.
All right, so there's a Boon Satyr on the end step. So now a 4-2 is flown in here. And again, Jose, the tough thing here for Jose, I don't want to use the term interesting, but the tough thing here is that a lot of lands are just coming to play tap right now.
Yep.
So he's kind of like playing off curve, for lack of a better term, and he's really having some difficulty. Boon Satyr showing its flexibility and how powerful this card is, because Brian, as you mentioned, he could have just been playing draw go, but he actually just has a 4-2 end of turn, and now he can get some advantage here. Does Santana want to trade a Selesnya Charm, or attempt to trade a Selesnya Charm for this Boon Satyr? Looks like the answer is going to be yes.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that Selesnya Charm doing much else. So.
Yep. So trade is going to happen. 2-2 gets in front of the 4-2. See if Kibler has anything to follow up with. Is it time to actually use that Vraska and take it down?
Well, I would be loath to do it here because that lands it at 4, so if Jose has Storm Breath Dragon, then your Vraska's just killed, and, with all the cards that are in Jose's hand and all the powerful draws that he has, I think it's very challenging to run that line.
Yep. You see Kibler is really considering his actions right now about what he should be doing. Slowed down greatly. He's saying, what do you have over there? How am I supposed to use this Vraska? I've only got one in my deck. I got to make sure I use it right. All right, I'm going to kill a Chain to the Rocks. As you mentioned, this does open himself up to getting Storm Breath Dragon.
Yeah, it's possible Brian has one of his spot removal spells in his hand, though, and cares less about it.
Busy and Mortar the draw step here for Santana. You see a Temple Guard, he's got a Mountain, he's got that Elspeth that he's had for a while now. He's going to tap 5-6 mana. It's time for the Planeswalker to come into play.
So I assume we're going to plus Elspeth and make 3 soldiers.
And this is a difficult spot. I mean, I don't know how bad of a spot this is. It's kind of difficult, but at the same time, you've got a Vraska that can just off the Elspeth, and then you have to worry about the 3 soldiers with Lot of the Troll can likely be able to fight through.
Yep.
So you're probably doing okay.
Lot of the Troll also has Trample, which is nice here as well.
Yeah.
But Brian just feels very low on resources. He needs to squeeze everything that he can out of this Vraska because he doesn't have a lot left in the chamber.
And we know he's got 2 cards in his hand. It looks like that card is Abrupt Decay. It might be a Golgari Charm, and then he has a Swamp in his hand. So he has no creature to discard. You see that he wants to play that spell, and it's definitely Golgari Charm. It looks like it's Golgari Charm land. It might be a forest, might be a swamp. Doesn't really matter. He wants his Lot Troll back. He's going to get it back. He draws a card to go along with that forest. Looks like it may be another Lot Troll. But now it's important to see how does he want to use Vraska.
Well, I don't think he wants to be taking up in the face of Elspeth taking up. I think he has to take care of Elspeth this turn.
Okay. So again, shuffling through his hand, as he is aching to do. Just trying to figure out exactly what he wants to do, because the tough part here for Brian is that the draw steps here for Santana's deck I feel are much better than they are from Brian's deck. So Brian I think is the mode of I need to close this game out. I need to close it out like right now. I need to try to get this game over with. So now here's blockers.
And I believe the last card in Jose's hand, or one of the last cards in Jose's hand, is Mizian Mortar.
Yeah,
so
he's got a Mortars hanging out.
If this induces all of Brian's regeneration mana, that looks like he's going to pump one of the trolls.
Yep. So he's going to pump one troll, discard a Dragmangler, regenerate the other troll, get those 2 soldiers out of here. Kibler's got just a forest left in his hand. He's going to say, take care of Elspeth. I leave you with 1 token. I trample over for a little bit of damage, so we'll get life totals up to snuff for you guys at home. And you'll see Santana's going to pass the turn back with just a token, 6 lands. He draws a Storm Breath Dragon. A huge draw there.
Yeah, very powerful here. Now I'm curious to see if Jose would rather land at this turn or just overload his mortars.
He's going to start by attacking Vraska with the token, which is a good start. If you're Jose in this situation, you know Brian has no hand, so you've got all the information. You know he's got a Dragmangler in his graveyard, so if he draws a land, he can scavenge with it. What do you do in this spot?
I think right now that I would overload the mortars.
Okay.
I'm Jose.
He's going to go reach. He's going to play Storm Breath Dragon and just pass the turn back. Yeah, it's too late. I think it may have been a misstep on his part, because realizing that I may want to attack with this and maybe get in a racing situation, but he already killed the Vraska.
Oh, and
there's a hero's downfall.
What a draw.
It is and it isn't. It's
Oh,
scary.
no, well, I mean, this is going to end up trapping Brian.
Yeah,
At Mortars, but from Brian's perspective, that's a powerful draw that turn. But I think he's in a world of hurt now.
And I think it's a situation too where Brian had to cast it.
Oh no, yeah, there's no question.
But now Jose, and that's a really good draw step there for Jose too. Even though it's a land, it's a scry land, so now he can control his draw step. Mortars, does he want to keep that Mortars on top? He's already got one. Do I need another one? He decides the answer is yes. He's going to keep Mortars on top. He's going to overload Mortars, get both those lot trolls out of there, get in for one, knock Kibler down to 17. So Kibler's life total is high, but he needs threats, and he needs them right now. Reaper probably being the best card he can draw.
And we know that Brian has a lot of discard spells still left in his deck, and Jose has many more powerful draws between Elspeth and Assemble a Legion and Stormbreath Dragon. So, Brian's way ahead of life, and Jose's not pressuring him, but I don't think this kind of draw-go battle favors Brian's deck very much.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the situation is much worse for Brian than it is for Jose. The control deck has done exactly what it wants to do, which is establish control. Now he needs to turn the corner and get the game over with so Brian can't top deck out of this. Lockstone Smiter is going to up the clock in a big way. Kibler draws a card. It's a Golgari. It's a Golgari Guildgate. He's going to pass the turn back. You see Advent of the Worm drawn, and you can see just the power level of the Naya control deck, each draw step, because now Kibler is in a situation where he can draw, like, bad discard. Boon Satyr isn't great here, which is the card I actually think he just drew for the turn. There's a 5/5 on the end step, and Kibler is a sinking ship right now.
Yeah, I believe Abrupt Decay is the last card in his hand, which will handle the token, but again.
And right now, sitting on a 2-turn clock, in with everybody. There is Abrupt Decay to take care of the token. Kibler going to go down to 5 from the Smiter and the Soldier token. So Kibler's going to need a big draw. Again, Reaper of the Wild is probably the best draw in his deck right now. He draws a card. It's a Hero's Downfall. That's not terrible.
Yeah. Still, Brian can only play this kind of game for so long.
Yeah.
These spot removal spells are okay, but he needs to find a threat and try to end this game quickly.
So Kibler takes care of the Smiter with the Downfall. Going to go down to 4, draw a card for the turn. Let's see what this is. There is the Reaper with enough mana to give it Hexproof and Death Touch.
Although Advent of the Worm, the draw this turn for Jose.
Not a bad draw. And it's funny because you take a look at the Naya control deck list and the list that Brad played, how many Advent of the Worms are hanging out in there? 2, maybe 3. So are you going to play around Advent of the Worm right now for Kibler? There's a Thoughtseize. Ugh.
Although it's actually not terrible here because of the Mortars in Jose's hand. I mean, there is something good to get out of there.
Well, so we take a look at if he does Thoughtseize right now, he would go down to 2. He's coming into the red zone. He's going to get punished severely right now for this attack. And this is the question I kind of brought up is, are you going to actually play around Advent of the Worm at this point?
No, I don't, because the odds of Brian being able to beat Advent of the Worm are so low to begin with at this stage that, once you're playing against Advent of the Worm anyway.
Yeah, if you choose to play around it, here's actually going to be a block, which is a little bit interesting. I guess Jose being at 8, but now you can just say Advent of the Worm on the end step. Kibler going to take a look at his card, and he's going to extend the hand. Yeah. So Jose Santana with Naya control defeats Brian Kibler 2-1. Nelson's deck, even though he didn't think it was a great choice moving forward, does defeat Kibler, and he's going to start the tournament off 1.